Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Guys Who Stare at Stats. Cade Kennedy here once again alongside Tyler Riggs as we make our way to the Big Ten portion of our football conference previews. And Tyler, we're almost halfway through the Power 5 here. Once we get halfway through the Big Ten, we'll be halfway done. Once again, just continuing to knock all these out here. It's almost August. I mean, it's a good time. Everyone's getting ready for fall camps. That's all going on. We're wrapping up media days. It's exciting. It's one of the great times of the year. And folks, as we get closer and closer, obviously we're going to have the Pac-12 preview after this and the ACC as well. You're not going to want to miss those either, so feel free to like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to know when these things come out. And as always, leave a comment down below. You're going to disagree with one of us, more than likely, possibly both of us if it's your own team as well, maybe. But it's always good to see, good discussion about where we think everything's going to go. Or, if you just want to call us stupid, that works too. Hey, whatever you want to do. It's a free country.
It is.
But getting into Michigan, it's only fair to start with the team ranked first in the East in the media preseason poll there. They only did it by division, which, hey, that's okay. Trying something different.
Sure.
Always like to see. But Michigan, obviously, the defending Big Ten champions. Jim Harbaugh in his 9th year. It still feels like yesterday when he got hired. I still remember that whole, what are we going to do here? Oh, we're going to bring in Jim Harbaugh. Let's see how that gamble works. It worked pretty well. They've won some Big Ten titles. They've gotten some playoff appearances. They just need to take that next step and win a playoff game. Win a national championship. Whatever Blue Blood wants to do. But, hey, he went 13-1 last year. J.J. McCarthy, he's back. Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, they're both back. Just about everybody of your main core you really needed back is back for Michigan. You got great defensive players as well, a good offensive line. Everything you really need to compete for both that Big Ten title and the national title.
Yeah, absolutely. The long and short of it is this team on paper, probably one of the most complete teams in the country, definitely in the Big Ten, the complete team, I would say. No real big question marks, right? It's just, hey, how far can they go and what can they do to make sure that, like I said, they take that next step to be up there with, that limited group that seems to be just basically Georgia, Bama, and then everybody else. Can you put yourself in that conversation of, hey, we are a perennial contender? And, just looking at the long and short of it there as well, probably, we always talk about quarterbacks, but if J.J. McCarthy could take that next step and really just be that true blue X factor like he shows at times he could be, and then you mentioned the running threats in the backfield with him, that would be a really, really tough offensive tack to stop. Something we haven't said about Michigan in a long time, right? To just be so fearsome on offense that they're tough stop. We know they can run the ball. They've been able to do that quite well under Coach Harbaugh, but really having that complete 1-2 punch in the pass game, in the run game. And, we know defensively they're always going to be legit. So can they get that difference maker at quarterback? Can they get that guy that, dare I say, might put himself in the Heisman race, so to speak?
And, you look at Michigan's schedule here. East Carolina to start everything, UNLV, Bowling Green, Rutgers, and then you go to Nebraska, your first real big game, so to speak. We'll use it as a helmet game, Tyler.
Sure.
We'll say that, Matt Rule, we'll see what they have there. Minnesota, you got your rivalry game, got to see if you can get that little brown jug again. Indiana at Michigan State, bye week. Purdue at home, go to Penn State, which you might argue is their first real big game all year.
Yeah.
And then at Maryland, and then Ohio State at home for another bout of the game. Michigan's trying to get that third win in a row on Ohio State, so it's going to be interesting to see how that all pans out, Tyler.
Is that the one that we saw a situation here with OU with Gundy getting the last laugh, so to speak, almost running seemingly Lincoln Riley out of town after getting that big win. Is that the one that breaks the straw on Ryan?
We'll have to find out.
If he
Tyler
loses 3 in a row,
if he
might go 11-1 and get the head call for there.
We saw that last year. Ohio State, 1 point loss to Georgia. Well, we lost to Michigan. What are we doing? We need to start looking around.
Yeah.
It's crazy to hear, but that is the life of a blue blood.
Yeah. One, as the Ohio State coach, you got to win that Michigan game, man.
You absolutely have to, yeah. But, Michigan's schedule, looking at it, we pretty much, we looked at it. There's no real major challenge until you get to mid-November.
Yeah.
You have that Penn State game. We'll obviously talk about Penn State here in a minute. But the Nittany Lions, I mean, they're going to be a big competition, of course. You're lucky it's not a whiteout. I mean, it's big noon kickoff, which usually means if it is a whiteout, it's not as intimidating as it is at night, but still going to be a big game nonetheless. Then Ohio State, we already talked about, that's the game. And, I mean, for the last 2 years, that has been, the game to be the game, basically. I mean, it's 2 11-0 teams, everyone just slugging it out, trying to see who's going to be the best team in the Big Ten, who's going to be one of the best teams nationally. Always has implications, and this year's no different. You look at Michigan's schedule, 11-1 at the minimum is what I would think for Michigan. At the worst, you split one of Penn State and Ohio State.
Right.
You go either way. I think Michigan easily has the capacity to go undefeated here as well. I think,
absolutely.
Ohio State being at home is obviously your big game there. Penn State, we'll talk about them. Some people are high on them, some people are not. It just kind of depends on where you sit with them. But I think Michigan is going to be right back in contention. There's no real drop-off imminent there.
And just to add a little bit of fairness, I guess, for the rest of the schedule, really that 4-game stretch where 3 of them are on the road there you see with Nebraska, Minnesota, Indiana, Michigan State, how you either win those or respond to those, that kind of tells you where Michigan's at. Obviously, we are very high on expecting they'll blow right through those essentially. You might face a little adversity, right? That might be your first real test of some adversity in the season. So as long as they get past those, hey, it's full sail. And like you said, that Penn State game, that's your first big, hey, circle this one. And then, you respond 2 weeks later in that Ohio State game and see if you can take 3 straight.
And, I mean, the Michigan State game, to add a little bit to that, I mean, it is East Lansing at night. That'll be a big game for Michigan State. They'll be riled up for that. But if you're Michigan, you kind of have to expect to just roll into that game, comfortably win, and then go. That's just where your expectations are for this year. And then, of course, we can't talk about one without mentioning the other, Ohio State. Ryan Day in his 5th year, 45-6 record at Ohio State.
It's crazy that guy.
But he had 2 losses to Michigan.
Oh, man.
And, that's bad. Can't do that, Tyler.
Can't do that.
Cannot do that. 11-2 last year. I just want to read off some of these names at wide receiver, Tyler. We got Marvin Harrison Jr. We got Emeka Ibuka. You look at Julian Fleming as well. Running backs, Trevion Henderson and Mayan Williams. We haven't even gotten to a quarterback yet, which is Kyle McCord is more than likely going to be the quarterback for the Buckeyes this year. To me, this is almost the exact same thing we talked about with Alabama in our SEC preview. You have all the weapons in the world. It's just, can your quarterback perform?
Yeah.
Can you make the big play when you need to? And that's going to be the question for Ohio State. Can Kyle McCord step up, literally just anything he wants out there in terms of offense he has? He has all the talent around him. He's just got to do it.
Yeah, and 2 sneaky things to watch out for, I think, with Ohio State, the 2 biggest question marks that I could see, right? First of all, it's not the quarterback for me. I have faith in anybody who steps in there, whether that's McCord or somebody else, because of what you just mentioned. They've got the weapons around them. I mean, my goodness, they've had an electric – I mean, that receiving core that they've had for the last 2 or 3 years now, it looks kind of like that Alabama quarterback room when you had Mac Jones, Jalen Tua, and Bryce. Like, that's insane, They've got that type of quality at the receiver spot. The running backs, outstanding. The 2 biggest concerns I have, first of all, probably the biggest one, the offensive line, I think, might see some of the biggest uncertainty it's had in a long time. They've had some really, really good offensive lines, roll through there, especially under Day. But they lost some of that talent. Last year they kind of showed a little bit of chink in the armor, and this year there's really a lot more question marks there. Can they get that group together early in the season, right, and get them on the right track early? And then the other side of it is you got to see a little bit better defense under Jim Knowles in the second year. There's a reason he brought him in, because things weren't quite working, especially in that secondary, which is something we're not used to with Ohio State. Usually that secondary is really good. Linebacking core was a bit shaky at times under the first 3 years for Day, so he brings in Knowles last year. Obviously, you can't just fix things overnight, so it was kind of an up-and-down defense at times. And we say up and down, they're still one of the better ones in the nation, but for what the standard is, it's got to be better. So that's kind of the 2 big question marks. Can the offensive line, first and foremost, come together? can that defense get back to what we know Ohio State can produce on that side of the ball, especially in that back seven, so to speak, the linebackers, the secondary.
And when you look at the Buckeyes' schedule here, I mean, Indiana, Youngstown State, Western Kentucky, you're expecting to plow through those three. Your big game, obviously, is Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going off the game 2 of the home and home now, which I always love these types of games.
Yeah,
Anytime you
nice.
get fun helmet games together like this, any big marquee matchup's always good to see for the sport. It's going to be a huge one. I mean, Notre Dame is just trying to do everything they can. You need to get that big win. There's your big win opportunity right there. We'll obviously talk about Notre Dame later. Then you get the bye week. You get Maryland. You get Purdue on the road. There's that, the trap game of all trap games for Ohio State.
I don't know about that.
Purdue's, 6-2 against them since 2000 or some weird record like that.
That's true.
And it's right before Penn State. I'm just saying, Big Ten schedule makers know what they're doing, trying to create drama there. Then you go to Wisconsin, big night game at Camp Randall. Wisconsin fans are happy about that. At Rutgers, Michigan State, Minnesota, and then, of course, at Michigan there in Ann Arbor. Should be, you look at Ohio State's schedule, seeing kind of, the uncertainties a little bit this year, maybe this is another 2-loss season for the Buckeyes. It feels weird saying that, maybe having that, back-to-back kind of like Alabama we talked about.
Yeah.
But with all the big games they have.
I was about to say, it certainly has a lot more pitfalls than the Michigan schedule, right? Yeah. I mean, this one, that Notre Dame game early, Freeman's going to be looking to get some more retribution there, show that, hey, I could do it there at Notre Dame. As much as we mean about the Purdue game, you mentioned the record against them in the last about decade worth of matchups. Yeah, that's a concern when a team's pulling that record against you. Penn State, as you had mentioned, they could be a wild card in this conference. So, and then that Wisconsin game's no joke. So yeah, they've definitely got a tougher draw, I'd say, than Michigan by far. And it just can you fix some of those little bits of question marks you have going into the season? I mean, we expect Ohio State to rip off 10 wins at least. That's what they do. They're a national title contender for the most part. It's just where's the potential of this team now that, you don't have C.J. Stroud anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at it, at least for me, it's at least a minimum 10-win team. We've come to expect that from Ohio State. If it's anything less.
Massive disappointment.
Yeah, massive disappointment, obviously. But, I mean, Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan, you've got to take 2 out of 3, I would feel like. That's the Ohio State way. Michigan's a rivalry. You have to win the game there. Penn State's a home game. You should win that one. Notre Dame's a little bit iffy. I can see Notre Dame being, inspired for that one. Marcus Freeman wants to get his big win. It's still early enough in the season. I don't know if Notre Dame can win that game. Obviously, we'll talk more about Notre Dame when we get to them. But if you're Ohio State, yes, it's a bit more of a brutal schedule than Michigan. But look at all those quality wins you can rack up as well to see the flip side of it.
Right, yeah. And, I mean, Dave, for as much as he's getting the calls for got to get the chop because you can't beat Michigan, he succeeds in those big-time moments, right, and make sure his team's prepared for him. So it's kind of one of those sayings, we talk about with, like, we've talked with Texas A&M. We'll believe when we see it. We'll believe when we see it of Ohio State failing, pretty much is how I'd put it.
I mean, you're talking about the one team that really hasn't had a bad decade ever in football. I mean, they're just always the one consistent, no ups or downs. You know where they're going to be.
Yep.
And I expect the same out of Ohio State here. That moves us on to Penn State, who's projected 3rd in the East. And Penn State, I mean, they had a good year last year. James Frankel, it's his 10th year. Penn State is this weird combination this year because it kind of goes in that same category with Ohio State. You have some weapons. You have, your good defensive players. So do you believe in Drew Aller?
Yeah.
Do you believe in him or do you not believe in him is kind of the determiner on Penn State here, Tyler.
It is, and in some people's minds, he's described as a guy that could elevate their offense because he should be theoretically more of a threat than Sean Clifford was. Sean Clifford was a good quarterback. He just wasn't a guy that you could expect to put you on his back. He was just going to make good decisions, be smart about things, for the most part, not lose you the game. Maybe not go out there and just straight up win you the game, but made sure that you stayed in it. So if Aller is up to the hype that some people have them, yeah, this could be a Penn State team that really kind of sneaks up on Michigan, Ohio State, and causes some problems. If not, then they'll probably find themselves just solid, but a bit behind that Michigan, Ohio State group.
And that's where I kind of expect Penn State to be. To me, it's one of those, you look at the schedule, West Virginia, Illinois, Iowa. Iowa could be a fun game. I could see that.
Over Delaware, the Blue Hens like
Hey,
that.
listen, I'm sorry. Apologies to Joe Flacco's school. Delaware's, good FCS program, but I'm not expecting a fight there. Or at least not one to last longer than the first quarter.
Right.
And then, you go to Northwestern, you get your bye week, you beat up UMass. You're 6-0, and Ohio State's right there. You should be 6-0 going into that game. There's no real exceptions to me that you look at and go, well, unless there's some catastrophic injury or something like that, you got to be 6-0 going to Columbus. You got to be 6-0 in that game. I don't expect them to win that game being on the road, but then you got to turn around and you get Michigan in a few weeks after that. You have Maryland right before. Could maybe be a trap game if you think about it. You don't want to get too caught up on Michigan there, but
Tunga Vailoa. Anyway, no.
yeah. Anyway, you're just we'll get to Maryland next, Tyler. I'll let you go off and say your piece there. But the interesting thing this year, final game of the year, Michigan State, Lane Grant Trophy, hooray! But at Ford Field in Detroit. I mean, you have the Friday night, the neutral site game in Detroit. Yes,
right. Yeah, I know.
I mean, I get why they did this. It was more of like a TV thing, trying to get a big Black Friday game and compete and all that. But why could that game not have just been at East Lansing? Like, I don't understand why we had to move it to Detroit. Doesn't really make any sense to me. But either way, Penn State should be a 10-win team. That's kind of where I see it. Whether you believe the hype or not about Aller, I mean, that's where Penn State should be. They're right there up against Ohio State and Michigan, not directly 1-to-1 with them, but pretty darn close.
Yeah, I agree with the 10 wins. I think there is a scenario, just because Aller's not a proven commodity yet. Let's say he's an abject disaster for some reason. Don't expect him to be, but let's just say that happens. Worst case, maybe you fall in a couple of those weird road games like Maryland and Michigan State. Then you could, worst case, 8-4.
Yeah.
Anything less than that's just something as horrible has happened, obviously. Like you've lost to Iowa or something like that on top of the rest of those. But yeah, I'd say 10-2 should be the expectation. Then if you're Penn State, if you could just squeeze out one of those wins against Ohio State and Michigan, then all of a sudden, hey, you put yourself in a spot where maybe you're there for not only a conference championship, but maybe you put yourself in a playoff spot. So that's their hope, is to try to squeak one of those out. And then obviously, like I said, minimum, got to win 10 with the schedule.
Yeah, I was like, with everything's built, double digits is the goal. And that brings us to Maryland. Tyler, I know you got the smirk on your face already. I know this is one of your teams. You got the everything going for you. I know we talked about this the last time we did the previews.
I'm talking about this for the last 2 years.
We talked about
pushing the 10-win Michigan, or 10-win Maryland.
10-win Maryland. It's
propaganda for like the last 3 years.
Yeah, I know. Fifth year for Mike Loxley. 8-5 last year. Just need 2 more wins, Tyler. You look at the schedule. Towson, you can win that game. Charlotte, Virginia, Michigan State on the road.
We'll see.
Indiana, at Ohio State.
Probably a loss.
just the sudden change. Win, loss. And then Illinois, homecoming. Bye week. You're going to win the bye week.
Absolutely.
There you go. You should always try to win the bye week. Go to Northwestern.
Mega dub.
Penn State at home.
As a loss.
Okay. I tried to hype you up on the Penn State one, but at Nebraska.
Dub.
You get Michigan at home.
Dub.
Oh, there you go. There it is. And then you go to Rutgers.
Dub.
There you go. So that's your 10 wins there. So we're talking in theory then a 3-0, and then 4. That gets you 5, 6. That only gets you 9.
No, that's a maybe on the Michigan State.
Okay, maybe.
Count it as a win. So we'll give it the old tie right now. The
okay.
9-2-1 could be a coin toss. No, realistically though, it would be hilarious just because I've memed for it for 3 years. Plus, as of made the campaign forward to you privately and publicly. Got to bring back the flag jerseys. That's what you need to win 10 games. Just saying. Just saying.
Oh,
But,
man.
I mean, you bring back Tagovailoa, got the quarterback there.
You do.
You got a defense that improves, still has room to improve. You just need some consistency. I think this team should contend for 8 wins realistically again. It's going to be tough, in all honesty, get over Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan, those 3 games.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really tough. And then, that Michigan State game early in the season, that's going to be your first real test. It's going to be your first conference game. Now, if they could get past that one, I'd like to say I feel confident about 9 wins at least, because I just don't think you're going to have the talent to beat Ohio State, Michigan, or Penn State. But I think that's their ceiling. I think realistically another at least 8-4 campaign, then whatever happens with the bowl game is probably where they're at with this Maryland team.
And that's more kind of my line with it. I think they're probably an 8-9 win team. Could they get to 10? I mean, if they could pull out one miracle at home, that would get them to that 10.
Yeah, if you could, exactly. Miracle's a proper term.
Yeah, I was like, beating one of Penn State or Michigan would be, I mean, it's a miracle for Maryland then. But if they can get to 10 wins, I mean, I will let you on the stream to do whatever you want to celebrate. But
I will will order, because of, like we talked about, some personal success I found.
Yeah.
Away from sports. If that happens, I will order a full-on Michigan shirt. No.
You're going to order a Michigan shirt.
Michigan hoodie and Michigan sweats. Michigan, Jesus.
Yeah, I was going to say, why are you?
It's late. It's 2 a.m.
Yeah, it is with 2 a.m.
Maryland, that's what I'm trying to say. I will order a full-on Maryland flag hoodie and sweats.
There you go.
It will go down. If they pull out 10 wins, it's going down.
See, I would have thought you were going to bring like crab cakes or something to celebrate. Have something there. But
Maryland flag, hoodie, and sweats. Maybe even underwear.
You went too far. You went absolutely too far. I can deal with the flag. We don't need to get that. This is what happens when we record at 2 a.m., folks. I apologize.
I would have said that at 5 p.m. Don't let them lie to you.
Yeah, don't worry. It all goes downhill from here.
Yeah, that's all right.
But looking at it, once again, Maryland, probably an 8-9 win team.
At best.
At best, 10, and Tyler gets to publicly celebrate in front of everybody. He's going to run around with the Maryland State flag.
That's right.
But moving on to Michigan State, the better we can get away from Maryland here. But Central Michigan, Richmond, and then the big game against Washington. How about this, though? I mean, not to go full tangent on this, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit. The Michigan State-Washington game being a Peacock exclusive. So what are we doing?
Hey, I subscribe to Peacock because I watch WWE, and that's where the pay-per-views are, so I'm not upset.
I am upset. Just put it on NBC. It's at 4 o'clock. You're going to put Michigan State-Maryland on NBC. Why not put an equally or better game? Not to offend you, Tyler.
Is it better, Cade?
I'm not trying to go offend your terrapins here, but I mean, Washington is going to be a top 15 team at least. We don't know where Maryland will be. We'll talk about that when we get to the Pac-12. But Michigan State, Mel Tucker, 5-7 last year, the 4th year for Mel Tucker. And Michigan State just last year, you're trying to continue to improve upon the defense. Your offense kind of sputtered around at times and really went nowhere. Noah Kim, he was the quarterback, trying to get back at it again, just trying to see anything the Spartans can do. But you look at the schedule, you go to Iowa, never a great place to be at, especially when you're a team that can struggle on offense at times. That's a defense you don't want to face. You get Washington, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. Not fun teams to play right now.
No, and it's kind of disappointing. Like we thought there for a minute, Mel Tucker was going to really, put Michigan State back in a spot where they hadn't been in a while.
Yeah,
it's kind of regressed, and then you lose Keon Coleman after the spring. It's a big blow.
It is.
It's one thing to lose Peyton Thorne because obviously Kim was on him, and he felt like probably Kim had won that starting job. That happens with quarterbacks. We know that in the modern day age of the open transfer portal. But to lose that type of talented receiver, and then not only that, come back with a defense that, especially in the secondary, doesn't look like it's really improved much and had a lot of issues last year. I'm not feeling great about Michigan State right now. It's just I don't know where they'll be at. Maybe Tucker pulls it off and they find a way to bring it all together. But you mentioned some of those games at Iowa, get the Washington game early, Michigan, Ohio State there. I mean, that's tough. Penn State to end the season. I mean, I don't know if I could project Michigan State for much more than maybe 7 wins here.
Yeah, and that's what I've kind of looked at is like this could be another 5-7 season. I could see 6-6, 7-5, 4-8. Worst case scenario, I would think that would take a lot going wrong. But
sure.
I mean, that's kind of what we've seen though from Michigan State. Ever since Kenneth Walker left, it's been downhill from here for the Spartans.
Well, and they just haven't found that quarterback either.
Yeah.
Before Kenneth and even with Kenneth, they had a string of some solid quarterbacks, and it just hadn't materialized. And they've kind of got away from being able to play really good defense too. So that's you do that, and it opens up to the possibility of quite a bit.
Yeah, we'll see what Michigan State does, but looking at it right now, it is not a favorable look for Sparty. And that brings us to Rutgers. Now, Rutgers is a bit interesting, Tyler, because they start on a Sunday. They get to play Northwestern for all of the world to see. And my goodness, if you enjoy football, it's going to be a game.
Oh, man.
It's going to be one of the games of all time, Tyler.
One of the games.
One of the games. Greg Schiano, 4-8 last year. This is Greg Schiano's 15th year at Rutgers when you count his 2 stints together. It's incredible to think about. But the run game had some success last year at times for the Scarlet Knights. They had a few, strikes of luck there, and then some of it just continued to try to power through. But you look at the start of the season, obviously that Northwestern game, you get Temple, you get the big game against Virginia Tech at home. I mean, anytime you get a big-name opponent, we'll see how Rutgers plays against that one. And then you got to go right to Michigan afterwards. Hey, you get the bounce back against Wagner, though, but you're going to need that because that's in between Michigan and Wisconsin on the road. They're not two fun places to play at. But for Rutgers, I mean, one of those you'd like to see them do better, but unfortunately, maybe they get out to a 2-0 start, and then it all starts going downhill from there.
So here's the thing. We make fun of, Iowa and their inept offense. Rutgers was pretty much just as bad, if not worse. So if you could find improvement on that side of the ball, especially in the passing game, that's something that has life for them for quite a while. And we know in the modern age of college football, you got to be able to sling that a little bit, man.
Yeah.
You can't just rely purely on the run. I mean, we're at the phase where even Army, and Georgia Tech and teams like that are starting to get away from the triple option because it's just not effective anymore. It just doesn't work that way. So if they can find some in the passing game, defense got to continue to improve, which that's a building process. We talk about depth a lot with these Power 5 teams that, you got to have that to compete. And so the big deal is you got to find somebody who can sling that football, man. They connected on only 48% of their passes in conference play last season.
Yeah. It was brutal.
In the year 2022.
It was brutal.
That's bad. That's real bad. So you got to pick that up.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at Rutgers' schedule here. I mean, Northwestern, Wagner. If you want to add Temple, maybe be nice and give them Indiana, but that's a road game. So we're talking another 3-4 win season for Rutgers, I would think, more than likely here.
Yeah, but and here's the thing, depending on how things break, the Big Ten could be wonky sometimes. You get to the back part of the season, maybe you found some early. Obviously, that first 4 games, you're probably looking at 2-2 easy, 3-2. Then you probably lose those next 3. Maybe you could push to close to 6-6 if you find some against Iowa and Maryland, right? If your offense is starting to pick up a little bit. But, yeah, the ceiling not too high for the Rutgers this year.
I mean, that's the thing, though, about Rutgers, though. You look at a program like that, you think, okay, you went 4-8 last year. You go 4-8 or 3-9 again. But then it can still technically be one of those, if you're just continuing to show more and more progress, building a more complete product, building up that depth, tightening everything together, you're still just trying to keep getting that program up in shape.
Yeah. If you squeeze that an extra 1 and 2, get to a bowl game, that'd be nice. That's what you want.
That brings us to the last team in the East, and that is Indiana. Tom Allen in his 8th year with the Hoosiers. 4-8 was Indiana last year, and you look at who they start with, Tyler. The Big Ten was not not kind to them.
No.
Starting them with Ohio State in Bloomington. Then you get Indiana State. You get Louisville, and my favorite trope that we've seen a few times, the neutral game, playing in Indianapolis, not
Lucas Oil Stadium.
Lucas Oil Stadium. Then you get Akron. You go to Maryland. Bye week at Michigan. Rutgers for homecoming. You go to Penn State. Wisconsin at Illinois, Michigan State. And then, your Old Oak and Bucket game against Purdue. Indiana, interesting position here because you've got some players on offense. You've got like a Cam Camper, a wide receiver, Christian Turner, Taven Jackson. You have some pieces here on offense if you can turn things around just a little bit. But when you play some of the teams you do, obviously being trapped in the East with Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, it's always a bit brutal to find anything, beyond that 9-3 cap you would have. And then you add a little bit more onto that, a Wisconsin, a Michigan State, a Purdue, a Maryland. And you just see it start stacking up against you.
Yeah, the magic that was when they had Big Penix energy at one point in time has escaped them. That wasn't too long ago. I mean, that was, a mere 3 years ago. It's just it came to a point with Coach Allen where they just haven't been able to develop the guys they had, and they kind of lost some recruiting battles. Now they're trying to play the portal game and see if that can catch them up, but it's just – I don't know how it slipped away from Indiana like it did, and we talked about this with some other teams. We talked about it with Iowa State back in the Big 12 preview of just you have windows to capitalize for one of these programs that's trying to take themselves to the next level. You got to capitalize on those windows, and when you don't, you see a regression, you see a slide back, and unfortunately this has happened for Indiana. And, the schedule – you're in, the tough side of the conference in terms of divisions. So, yeah, you got Ohio State, you got Michigan, you got Penn State, you got Wisconsin. Michigan State's not easy, but you get past that. There's some games there you could win. It's just, can you get enough to really build the momentum to get yourself back up to a respectable spot, right? You can be 3-1 going into that Maryland game, I would say. But can you take that one on the road? Okay, you take it, you're 5-1 at Michigan. You get the break speed off of you pretty easy. You could maybe squeeze 7 wins out of this, on the high end maybe 8, but that's kind of what you got to strive for. That's your ceiling this year for Indiana. If you could do that, that probably save Coach Allen a little bit more time and maybe get some of those guys either via the portal or via recruiting that we're talking about that can start being those difference makers, get yourself built back up a bit.
Unfortunately for me, looking at it, with Indiana, I could see a 3-1 start possibly. You get that one to break your way against Louisville. But then Maryland, I think that's more than likely a loss. That puts you at 3-2.
My boys and the Terps some credit. Okay.
Hey, I think Maryland is going to be a solid team. Okay. That's 3-2. You go to Michigan, that's 3-3. I think you beat Rutgers. And then if you can find something against that Illinois, Michigan State, Purdue stretch there, you can get a bowl game out of this schedule.
Well, that's the thing. I think that stretch towards the end of the season is where you could pick up those wins like you're talking about to get to that bowl game. And there's a scenario where all 3 of those schools are not quite where they need to be. And you can take all 3 of those games, and maybe you could breach that 7-win, 8-win plateau.
Yeah, that's where I think Indiana, they could be anywhere from a 4 to a 7-win team this year. I don't think they're going to be some amazing out-of-nowhere story like we've seen them before, but if they can just cobble something together, like you said, anything to keep building that program up and just trying to buy some more time.
Yeah.
And that will get us out of the East and over to the West, where we start with Wisconsin. And let me tell you, Tyler, I don't know if I've ever seen a media war like this. Wisconsin beats Iowa out for first place in the West by 1 point. By 1 point. That's how razor thin the margin was of who deserved to win the West in, the preseason media poll between Wisconsin and Iowa here. But Wisconsin, Luke Fickell, first year, 7-6 last year for the Badgers. Braylon Allen, he's back at running back. He's still fun to watch. You look at this offense, though, Tyler. We talked about it with Florida, where we kind of dunked on them with Graham Mertz, and he was the quarterback at Wisconsin, obviously. You had an abysmal passing offense. That's going to change. You bring in Phil Longo, who was the offensive coordinator at North Carolina. You bring in Tanner Mordecai, who was at SMU.
Under an air raid type system.
Yeah, a guy who knows how to throw the ball. Can Wisconsin turn this thing around, not only just offensively, but get back to the Wisconsin we've seen before of, the 9-10 win seasons, just continuing to kind of own the West for a little bit, or at the very least, compete for that top spot.
Well, that's the fun part. If they do it, it's not going to be in the traditional Wisconsin sense.
That's true.
This is not going to be line up in the I formation and run the football. No. Long gone are the days of Monty Ball. We were with Tanner Mordecai in the air raid you mentioned for long ago. This might be more spread it out Wisconsin. This is a NCAA 14 fever dream here a little bit, to be honest. And if it works, I mean, they could kind of catch people off guard because you have to, once a team develops an identity like that, you bring in Luke Fickell, you've got to see change in the administration and everything in terms of how they want things to go. Now teams have to re-familiarize themselves with you. This is now not the same team you've seen. This is not, a team that's just, don't get me wrong, just because they're going to run the air raid or, spread-type offense doesn't mean they're going to be soft, but this is a team that traditionally is, hey, we're going to run downhill at you. We're going to try to get 4 or 5 yards a pop. We're going to play tough defense. But now they start spreading things out. You have to kind of erase everything you know about Wisconsin, right? So it'll be interesting. And schedule-wise, obviously, you, for the most part, it's not bad. Not bad. You get Ohio State at home. You get Iowa at home. And that's really, weird to say, but that's your big games. That's it right there. The rest of the schedule is not something I look at and be scared of. If I was Wisconsin, so yeah, this could return to them kind of being, like you were talking about, just kind of bullying the West a bit.
And you mentioned the identity of Wisconsin and what it's been. And it's interesting because I think we've talked about this a little bit, or at least I know I've seen it before. When Paul Chryst was the head coach last year, Wisconsin was so predictable.
Yeah.
That 42% of the time or something like that, the opponents would just put 8 in the box.
Yeah.
Wisconsin's going to run it straight at you. You don't have to think about it. It's Wisconsin. What else do you expect from them? And I think making that switch, like you mentioned, it's every NCAA 14 player's dream. You get to see Wisconsin line up and sling the ball around a little bit. Don't see that a whole lot, but it's going to be intriguing to me. And the best part about this is you really have 3 games before Purdue to really try to figure this thing out. Not to say Georgia Southern or Washington State or Buffalo or pushovers, but you really have 3 games to really try to get all the kinks out in this thing and just say, okay, we're confident about this. We've got Purdue. Let's go out there and show everyone who we really are now. And you get that Saturday night game against Washington State to show this thing off. You've got opportunity after opportunity. And, Tyler, it wouldn't surprise me. I seem to do this every year. There's one team in the Big Ten West, I look at it and try to find a way where this can happen. And Wisconsin's got the best chance of it. You look at that schedule and tell me they can't be 7-0. Ohio State comes to town.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Saturday night game on NBC. They win that game, you're 8-0, obviously. You look at that rest of the schedule, no one would touch you.
No.
Indiana, Northwestern, Nebraska at home, and at Minnesota.
Well, and even if you drop that Ohio State game, I look at it and I could easily see 11-1.
Yeah.
If things, work like you're talking about, things come together early for them with all the turnover they've had as far as roster and coaching staff in those first 3 games, and they really start finding a groove. Even if you lose one at Ohio State or against Ohio State, you go 11-1, albeit against kind of a weak schedule. You put yourself in a spot to go win the Big 12 championship game and potentially make the playoff.
Yeah, you get in the Big Ten title game there representing the West. Just turn around, boom, just like that. Yeah. The good old-fashioned 1-year rebuild.
And we know Michigan struggles with the spread, as we saw against TCU.
and that's the thing that's so intriguing to me about Wisconsin is like every year they're one of those teams I always look at, even knowing their struggles, and go, yeah, this team could win 8, 9, 10 games and switch things up a bit. There's no reason Wisconsin couldn't go 11-1 this year. Well, their schedule's just that favorable.
And it'll just be interesting to see, like we were talking about, with the seat change of philosophy. Obviously, as you mentioned, things were so stale under Paul Chryst that it was too predictable. It just really was. And it's sad to see because that brand of football where you're running downhill and playing a defense could still work with the passing game. We've seen Iowa in better days offensively make it work where there's play action and, just some of those boots and things like that that are really effective. And Wisconsin did that at a high level themselves for a time there, but just kind of all fell apart. So I definitely think the boldness say, okay, we're going to change things up a little bit. That could do them wonders.
It absolutely can. Now, we've talked about offense and how it can be hard sometimes, especially in the Big Ten West. If there's one team that just shows that more than everybody else, it's Iowa. I mean, you don't score 7 points on 2 safeties and a field goal and not get out of that unscathed from criticism. Kirk Ferentz has done a great job at Iowa. I mean, he's got stability. He's brought that program to just doing whatever. He's been there 25 years as the head coach.
And is one of those guys that when we talk about making the best of what you got, it's not a school that's going to pull in 4 or 5 star recruits consistently. They're not going to have the funding that Michigan, Ohio State does, or even a Wisconsin maybe. And he's, developed that talent, but have things gotten stale, right? Has it got to that point where it's just stale for those guys? That's what I think we'll find out this season.
And I mean, Iowa last year went 8-5, a tale as old as time. Offense that at times –
it was inept.
It was beyond inept. It was, how is this offense even functioning?
Yeah.
You just
It was
look at it and you had no idea how anything worked. It just made no sense trying to watch them play at times. But the defense, on the other hand, outstanding, as it's always been at Iowa.
Yeah.
That's just what they do. But you look at Iowa's schedule, start with Utah State, then, of course, your Cyhawk game with Iowa State, Western Michigan, and then you go to Penn State. And, I mean, this is a game that people have been excited for a little bit. Remember the last time these two got together, it was a top 5 matchup at Kinnick. It was a big deal there. Then you get Michigan State, you get Purdue, you go to Wisconsin, Minnesota, you have your bye week. Then the Wrigley Field game against Northwestern, which will be intriguing. It always is. And then Rutgers, Illinois, and Nebraska. To me, this is kind of the same thing with Wisconsin, Tyler. After that Penn State game, the only team that really poses a threat to Iowa is Wisconsin. They can beat everyone else on that schedule.
Yeah.
There's no reason Iowa can't be a 10-2 or 11-1.
Well, I mean, the only reason would be is if they're just somehow just as bad or worse offensively, right?
Yeah.
The key part is this year they've probably got the best quarterback they've had in a minute. Cade McNamara comes over from Michigan. He's proven to be a producer. Maybe not as explosive as a quarterback at times. That's why he's not at Michigan anymore, because they've got a guy now that they think could provide a lot of different things. But, he's been in tough situations. He's dealt with adversity and has been in some of those high moments. So if he could come out and be a leader and improve that offense, then, yeah, like you're saying, I mean, whether you win or lose that Penn State game, after that, you really only got one more get-up game, and that's at Wisconsin. So even if you lose those two, you can still push your way to 10 wins pretty easy, I think.
And that's where I kind of think Iowa will be this year. I like McNamara. I think he's a good quarterback. He knows how to win. He's been in those situations before. He's been in, that leadership as well. When You've all experienced that together, those playoff pushes, you can bring that to Iowa. I've been in this situation. I know how to react to this. Kind of calm everything down when things aren't going your way, get everything wound up when it needs to be. And I think Iowa can be a 10-win team. It really wouldn't surprise me to see a really good Iowa team this year. They just need that push offensively, which, like you've heard me say a lot already, if you've watched, definitely, at least to this point, if you're keeping track of all this, it's easier said than done.
Oh, yeah.
But if Iowa can do it, they could be that West can be theirs again.
I mean, if you could just score 25 a game, which is not a high bar in the modern day of college football, that's an 8-point improvement. They were that bad last year. They put 17 a game.
If they gave Brian Ferentz, who's the offensive coordinator for Iowa, if they just gave him a contract that said if you don't average 25 points per game, you're fired, or we're going to start putting your salary somewhere else, you would solve the problem.
Well, the problem is, obviously, his dad's the coach and the structure there. I mean,
Tyler, don't worry about the actual logistics around this. We got to put this situation in a bubble here.
True.
But honestly, though, looking at it, I mean, it's well documented. This is not some, amazing observation. Everyone knows Iowa's offense is the problem. Their defense is really good. Maybe McNamara can be that guy. We'll just have to see. That brings us to Minnesota. P.J. Fleck, his 7th year with the Golden Gophers, 9-4 last year for Minnesota, and they've got some weapons on offense, whether it be their tight end, Brevin Spann-Ford, whether it be wide receiver Chris Ottman-Bell, quarterback Athan Kalikamanis. Finally got to say that right. I've been trying to say that right all day, and I can't do words sometimes, Tyler. The fact that I did that at 2:15 in the morning, I don't know how. Thank you.
Claps.
Thank you.
Yeah, and, Kalikamanis, we talk about a lot of teams, it hinges on that quarterback. They still, I'm sure it's going to be tough to replace a top-tier running back, but they'll find somebody. They've done that pretty well under P.J. Fleck. They've got a run game. Can Kalikamas be what Tanner Morgan was for quite a while for him, which was great stability, right? That was a guy that has now gone on who was a leader, smart quarterback. Again, not explosive guy. He's not going to pass for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns, but he gave you 3,500 yards, 30 touchdowns to not that many picks, right? So if Kalikamas could repeat that, they're going to have a shot to sneak up there. The East, as we know, is the West, as we know, it's Wisconsin and everybody else. So if you could find a way to separate yourself from the rest of that pack, you could pull out some wins. Schedule-wise, the glaring problem is, obviously, you got both Michigan, Ohio State on the schedule. You got to go to Iowa. You got North Carolina in the non-con. That's all stuff that kind of hinders yourself, and then on top of that, you finish with Wisconsin. So I don't know what the ceiling is for this team, Cade. I don't know if they could overcome those big 5 games, right? Is this a 7-5 bunch, or do you see them pushing over that?
Well, see, I want to add another game to that list of concern. That's the opener against Nebraska. That's just because you get Matt Rule, game 1. He's looking to make a statement win.
Oh, my goodness.
At Minneapolis. It could happen. We've seen crazier things. We saw it happen with Nebraska literally last year where Northwestern was 1-0 in Ireland and 0-11 in America. They were better everywhere else but the country they play in.
Oh, no.
But, Minnesota, if they can get past Nebraska, which I think they will, I think Nebraska will give them a game for a while, but Nebraska is such a weird just anomaly as they've been for a while.
For Coach Rule.
But you look at that, a 2-0 start, you get North Carolina on the road. I don't think you win that game. You're 4-1 probably getting Michigan at home, which will be a huge game there.
Yeah.
You lose that one more than likely. Then you get a bye. Then you go to Iowa, which you'll need that bye to kind of shift gears and refocus because, 4-2, but the season not even close to being over. You're still right in the thick of everything. Iowa, Ohio State, both those games being road games, does not fare well. At Purdue can be tricky sometimes just because of how they can trip certain people up. We'll talk about Purdue later, though. There'll be a weirder story than usual this year. And then Wisconsin, end of the year, you're at home. You have the opportunity to pull everything off, but I think this is probably more a 7-win Minnesota team this year, which still isn't bad, but it's just compared to where they've been at times.
Exactly. And then at that point, does Coach Fleck enter the hot seat a little bit? We'll see. I kind of agree with you. I don't know if they could really overcome some of those big games. I don't know if they quite got the talent there.
Yeah. We will have to see when it comes to Minnesota. Another team that's kind of that same position is Illinois. Of course, Brett Bielema, this is his 3rd year here with the Illini. Illinois they're a weird team, Tyler. They are the exact pretty much what you'd expect a Brett Bielema Big Ten team to be. Their defense is going to be stout. They're going to slow the game down. They're going to run the ball as much as they can. They're almost, if you could imagine a Big Ten West team, that would be Illinois currently. That is where they are, that old school type of game, slow things down, win with your defense, use your run game to support your defense type of battle. And it worked. You saw them put Michigan on the ropes last year. They've had several close calls, and that's what that type of system, when done correctly and effectively, can do. Now, the problem is, of course, when that doesn't work and you can start to slow things down. But Illinois went 8-5 last year. They had a good run. And you look at this schedule, and, we've talked about the West enough at this point that it wouldn't surprise me to see Illinois keep that up.
Yeah, and, the schedule, really not too many hardcore built-in losses. Probably Penn State, probably Wisconsin. At Iowa is going to be tough. But the rest of that schedule, not horrible. Definitely some tough ones. At Maryland could be interesting. At Kansas. But with the style they play, as you were talking about, it should keep you competitive in those games. Minus the two big ones of Penn State and Wisconsin. It's just, can the defense continue to be stellar like it was last year? And can you get enough production out of the offense, right? That run game is so crucial to this type of style. Because when you're not as talented, but you can run the ball, as you mentioned, that slows things down enough to give you a chance. It's just when you get kind of, in those consecutive 3-and-outs, that's when defenses start getting tired, things start to break. So this is that year for the Illini. If they could put together another solid season, 8 wins, maybe start winning some more of those recruiting battles, getting some guys interested through the portal. I wouldn't say a make-or-break leaping point year, but it's definitely a year that if you pull off another season like last year, could go a long way, 3 or 4 years down the road, so to speak.
It could. And, I mean, you look at the schedule, and it's favorable. I mean, Indiana, Northwestern, those are, winnable in November. And that's where you got to be your best at, of course. You got to win those big games when you get to them. Penn State, obviously, I don't expect them to win. Neither Wisconsin. But they could still, like we've kind of talked about some of the other teams, be good enough to be a thorn in someone's side.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, with that type of play they have, that's what you expect Illinois to do. I'd see another 7-8 win season out of the Illini here.
Yeah, and especially for the defense, could be a rebuilding year. If you carry that momentum, that would be huge. So that's where Coach Bill was looking at, man.
And that brings us to Nebraska. And Nebraska is a project, like you said. Matt Rule taking over his first year here. Nebraska gets, quite honestly, 2 of the most intriguing opening games they could get. You get a conference game, first of all, on the road. You get instant adversity right off the bat there. And then you get Colorado, week 2 in Boulder. You get Matt Rule versus Deion Sanders, who, if you see what they had that little Twitter spat for a while where everything went on.
Uh-huh.
It's already a rivalry. It's a big noon kickoff because, of course, it is. That game, I'm just going to tell you right now, that's a game you need to keep an eye on. That's going to be a fun game. It may not be a great game. It may not even be a good game. Both teams might be bad, for all I know. But I'm going to be watching that game because that might be a sicko's game, Tyler. But
put it in the books because Nebraska is starting 0-2. I'm telling you that right now. They're losing
right
both
now.
of those games. Losing both of them. They'll bounce back going into the Michigan game, be 2-2. Get the floor wiped with them. And after that, it's a we'll see. It's a we'll see.
It is a we'll see. I mean, you got Jeff Sims coming in, which is an option.
It's an option.
It's an option. He's not the worst quarterback in the world by any means.
I
He's
think
not.
he might be a downgrade, though, from Casey Thompson.
We'll have to see, because the thing about Sims, and I mean, we saw this all the time at Georgia Tech, he'd have, 1 or 2 plays where he looked great,
Yeah.
and then he'd go back to wherever. If you can get that greatness out of him, which will take a lot of time, this is not going to be some overnight Nebraska goes to a bowl game type
Absolutely
of thing.
not, yeah.
But you look at it, I think Nebraska could beat Colorado. I'm not that high on Colorado. I don't think they're.
I can't wait till we get to that Pac-12 preview.
Yeah, it's going to be intriguing when we get to that. But Nebraska, 3-1, going to this guy over here.
Pinky up.
This guy over here trying
Anyways.
to get at me. Anyway, I'm just going to. This guy over here. This is what happens when we record at 2:24 in the morning.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Anyway, 3-1, you get Michigan. It's a huge game for Nebraska. Unfortunately, they're going to get blown out. That's just how that's going to go. Probably lose to Illinois, bouncing back off of that. I really think this could be a 4 or 5 win season for Nebraska. I think if you can get that, get everything right there, at best 5 and 7, probably more like 3 or 4 wins. But you're still trying to build around. You went 4-8 last year. You're having to reshuffle everything again. And, I mean, that's just kind of where Nebraska is at right now. I think this is the beginning of building back up and getting not 100% back to winning national titles or anything, but at least being a competitor in the Big Ten West.
Well, and here's the thing. So that stretch after Michigan that you talked about, where you're Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue, Michigan State, Maryland, that's your opportunity to pick up 4 of those if you can, and get yourselves to 6-6. Because I think you take care of NIU and Louisiana Tech, right?
Right.
That little stretch there is where it's going to be because you're not beating Wisconsin. You're probably not beating Iowa. Talk about not beating Michigan. So those 3 guaranteed losses. And then we'll see on the first 2 road games. But the only thing that the issue is, Matt Rule's definitely – there's some coaches that come in first year, and they will take what they got and work with it, right?
Yeah.
There's other coaches, and this one's typically more common because it's harder to do the other way. They will come in, they will weed out the guys that they don't think fit their culture. The first year is usually not pretty because you're going through that massive – it's a huge culture change, right? So you got seniors that quit on you. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff like that goes on that first year. It's that cleaning house. All right, we're getting all the gunk out, right? Mike Leach did that quite a bit. He did it at Washington State, did it at Mississippi State. Rule is that guy. He is, in his debut seasons at Baylor and Temple, combined 3-21.
Yeah.
It's not because he's a bad coach. It's because that first year is, hey, we're cleaning house. You're either with me or you're out of here. And that means some of your talent goes because they're not with the culture. Maybe they're not, in the right mindset to be a positive factor, all that, right? And they prioritize those coaches in that first year, prioritize who can I count on for the future. It means a lot of those seniors not necessarily get ignored, but they're not really prioritized, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I'm not high on Rule in the first year. Doesn't mean, I'll say this for any Nebraska fans. If they start out struggling this year, let's say they go 3-9, 4-8, don't get discouraged. That just means, like I was talking about, that process of cleaning out the gunk and Coach Rule's eyes going on. If they achieve higher than that, like you're talking about, maybe they get to 5-7, 6-6, that's a big sign of, hey, this could really turn around quick, right? Because that means he's gone through that process and quickly has found guys that are contributing already in a big way.
And I think that's going to be the real intriguing uphill battle here. Like you mentioned, Matt Rule, he's a guy that can turn a program around. He absolutely is. It's just you have to go through that one bad season to clean everything out. Now, Nebraska is one of those weird ones that, I don't think they can, I guess they can because they've seen enough of it already. If things were to somehow get worse, if, say, worst case scenario, they go like a 2-10 or something like that this year, it's going to be, the most pessimistic I think we've ever seen Nebraska. Nebraska fans are pretty darn optimistic. They're, loyal. They sell it out. They were selling it out when it's 3-9. That's incredible to see. You don't see that everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's going to be, it's going to be tough for Nebraska. And, I mean, it's already tough. And I don't even know how it could get even more tough. But Nebraska needs something positive. They just need one glimpse of something.
Yeah.
And I think if they can even something as simple as if they start 3-1 and get Michigan, even something simple as that, which I know you disagree with, would be crazy. It would be just the support you would see immediately pour in would be just impressive to see. And I mean, it's something that I want to see Nebraska be good again. I want to see them get back. It's fun to see them be good. Those people deserve it. I mean, my goodness. When you're able to turn Lincoln from just a normal town to the 3rd biggest city in your state just on one game day alone.
Yeah.
It's crazy to see the sport they have.
You're right. That loyalty deserves to be rewarded.
It does.
Yep.
It does. But maybe they'll get back soon. Maybe they won't. We've seen how many hires now for Nebraska after Bo Pelini where they've just been trying to find that one guy. We will have to see.
By the way, if you want a good laugh, take some time to just, dig up some articles of when Scott Frost was hired.
Oh no! It was they'd found the savior. Like it was incredibly.
Oh man!
It was a trip.
Oh man!
But speaking of trips, you use trains. What does Purdue have? Trains. Is this a contender for the worst segue of all time?
Beautiful.
Absolutely,
beautiful. Pro segue.
There we go. Well, it's not a segue; it's a train. They're the Boilermakers, Tyler. Come on, get with the script. True. But Ryan Walters, in his first year here at Purdue went 8-6 last year. They won the Big Ten West before they had their date with Michigan. That did not go well, but Michigan was on their way to getting to the playoffs.
Yep.
And Purdue, I mean, they've got Hudson Card at quarterback. It'll be intriguing to see how that works. I honestly have no clue. Hudson Card was not amazing at Texas by any means, but
Hudson the wild card.
Tyler.
Had to slip that one in.
You had to get that one in there. I mean,
yeah.
you're right. He kind of is a wild card, though. We have no idea what to expect from him. This whole Purdue season just feels weird because with Jeff Brom, you kind of knew what you were getting out of Purdue. Is that kind of classic, they'll win, anywhere between 4 and 8 games. We have, they're going to give somebody a scare, maybe upset somebody they're not supposed to. You knew exactly what Purdue was about. But this year, I mean, you're going to have to just find something that works. And, I mean, you look at the first 3 games. Fresno State, Virginia Tech, and Syracuse. Would not shock me at all.
Winnable games.
Yeah, winnable games, but also would not shock me if they start out 1-2 or something like that.
Or 0-3.
Or 0-3, you're right. It could be, a rough start. And if it gets down to, 0-7 or something like that, just worst case scenario, because you look, if you're 0-3, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, Ohio State, that can go downhill fast. You look at it on the flip side, if you're just kind of struggling, fighting around maybe 2-4 or something like that. That Ohio State game, given Purdue's weird history with the Buckeyes, maybe you have a chip on your shoulder in that game, maybe you don't. And I don't know what to make of Purdue this year. There's so many scenarios with them where I just think to myself, I can see them doing that, but I can also see the complete opposite. They're a true wild card this year. I think that comes from just having to reshuffle everything around.
I just see him as a rebuilding project. Coach Walters coming in there. I think he has a good feel for what they'll need. It's not going to happen year one. Yeah. I think Hudson Card is I wouldn't say a steep downgrade, but I'd definitely say he is not Aiden O'Connell. Offensively, they're just going to have to find some guys to step up. The exciting thing for them and the thing I'll be watching for is they went and got Graham Harrell to be offense coordinator.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see what he will do. I think there will be some flashes of some good stuff for the future for that team this year. I just think at their peak, definitely probably around that 4 to 5 win range. And I wouldn't qualify that as a huge disappointment. It's definitely going to be a big rebuilding year. But I think this is what you need to hope for if you're a Purdue fan, is you see some of those flashes of what could be in the future with some of those younger guys on both sides of the ball. If you get that, I think things will start heading in the right direction, year 2 and year 3 of Coach Walters.
And that's what I'm expecting, a 4 or 5 win season, 6 if everything absolutely went your way.
Right.
But just to see what Purdue's able to do here in kind of more of a rebuilding year will be intriguing nonetheless. Which brings us to the final team in the Big Ten, Northwestern. David Braun in his first year overtaking just what has been an absolute mess.
Dumpster fire.
Just absolutely horrible what's been going on over at Northwestern there for the past who knows how long it's been. But Fitzgerald, of course, is out. We covered that in the show a few weeks ago. If you want to watch that video as well, get our opinion on that. But you got Ben Bryant in as a transfer from Cincinnati at quarterback. The only problem is at this point in time, I mean, you got so many people that might be exiting out. Northwestern was already a 1-11 team last year. I hate saying it, but Northwestern is probably going to go 1-11 again, I would think, just by the sheer everything going on right now. I mean, there's nothing I can look at besides that game against Howard.
Yeah, no.
Where it's just, I have no faith in them to do anything.
No, and I agree. It's just, it's going to be ugly again this year, and maybe even uglier than it was last year with about the same record, because there's just so much that's going to be sorted through still. I mean, program with all the allegations that's happened, the, firing of Fitzgerald, it's just kind of in a state where they're going to spend a few years picking up the pieces for that and see what happens on the other side of it. But, yeah, it's going to be ugly. I mean, it really will be. So it's unfortunate. Northwestern at times has had some really cool moments in the 20-aughts, if you will, 2000s. It's just we are far and away from that at this point.
We are. I mean, it's sad to see what's happened there. It's horrible to think about how long that's been going on, and not even just across football, but I mean, you saw what happened with their baseball department as well.
Yeah, well, and the other part,
there.
I talk about sorting out some of that stuff. You got to figure out what was real and what was not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of one of those situations, and they have kind of a similar situation with one of the high school teams in the area here, where they're kind of going through that of trying to figure out, okay, what's been happening, what has been happening, you know, and it sends a program in disarray, you know, because you got to really that stuff takes time to sort through and figure out, you know, what went down, how it went down, all that. We kind of saw, unfortunate not to necessarily compare it to that degree of it, but like the Penn State stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, and this is not quite on the level of the Penn State stuff, but a lot of this is some really deeper stuff that brings up a lot of conversations about the culture of, you know, I've seen so many guys on Twitter and social media when some of the stuff that was talked about when it first, yeah, that's bad, but some of the stuff's just old school hazing. It's like, just because it happened back then does not mean it's acceptable now.
Yeah.
And it wasn't acceptable back then. You just let it get by because you didn't know that you had the power to stand up to that. So, yeah, it's a tough situation, unfortunately, for Northwestern. There's going to be some dark years now because of it. I mean, you're going to have to go through that process. So all I can hope for is that gets sorted through and, you know, those people that may have been affected by that, you know, can – I don't know. I would say get their justice, but you know what I mean, that there could be some healing from those potentially traumatic situations that the program could then atone for some of that and then go forward.
I think that's the best thing that can happen at this point is just making sure that those people get whatever they need.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, anything they need, because, I mean, that is just – it's never acceptable. It's never okay. It's never anything but horrible. You know, I hate to end this Big Ten conference preview on such a somber note, but that's what happens when you have scandals and all this, and unfortunately,
it's got to be addressed, man.
Yeah, it has to be addressed. We can't just let it go on. But folks, as always, thank you for tuning in, and I just can't believe we're 3/5 of the way done with this. I mean, we've got 2 more conference previews to get to. We'll have the Pac-12, we'll have the ACC coming out. Folks, as always, if you want to see more, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below. Tell us what you agree with, disagree with, you know, all that fun stuff.
Tell me what you think of the Maryland State flag.
Tell Tyler what you think about the Maryland State flag. Leave a comment down below. Or just, you know, if you made it this far, just type a Maryland State flag in the comment section below. Just put the emoji in there. Do whatever you want to do. But, of course, as always, folks,